Good afternoon and welcome to the Center for Global Justice presentation that we have planned for you today on cryptocurrency. My name is Bob Datz. I'm a member of the program committee for the Center for Global Justice. For over 20 years, with a progressive perspective, the center has been conducting programs here in San Miguel de Allende and sending them out on the internet for later viewing, as well as live audiences to Zoom since the pandemic. And we're really happy to have you here. This little basket can be tickled in the front. This is, donations drive us. We don't really have a lot of overhead, but to make these presentations happen, we're all volunteers. So I would urge you to do that, or go to globaljusticecenter.org, and there you can, temporarily actually the donation button is suspended for the moment. We're changing some logistics, but you can view the archive of past programs, which this will be part of in a couple of days. So again, welcome, tell your friends, and we have coming up next week a documentary called The Age of Water about an unfortunate arsenic water pollution incident right here in the state of Guanajuato. And we're going to view that. It's a PBS presentation, and then we're going to have a discussion concerning how government here responds, or not, to environmental situations. So, and that's going to be with a local environmental activist and entrepreneur, Ricardo Vidargas. So, looking forward to that. And then the week after, we have the ambassador from Palestine to Mexico, who is based in Mexico City. She grew up in the States. She's very clear in English, and obviously, if we need to translate, which we hope we do, we will do so. With that said, I'd like to move to our program today. Cryptocurrency emerged in the wake of the global financial crisis and was held out as an alternative to the tyranny of state-issued money and a challenge to the power of the big banks. Ramaa Vasudevan, economics professor at Colorado State University, told Jacobin magazine last year that the breaking of the 100,000, that's probably lacking a few zeros, I'm sorry, probably 100 million mark for Bitcoin in December signals the changing, 100,000 mark on the price, I guess, for Bitcoin, signals the changing terrain under the new U.S. administration, which has now embraced crypto with much greater gusto, and it has nominated crypto enthusiasts for key administrative posts with the slogan of making the United States the cryptocurrency capital of the world, at the same time as it has lessened oversight and regulation of crypto and just about everything else. Whether that changing terrain will open up a seismic fault or lead to the flowering of a new Garden of Eden remains to be seen. But today, Professor Vasudevan will explain the basic nuts and bolts of crypto and discuss the unraveling of heady promises and get-rich-quick schemes in crypto finance, and the collapse of various crypto ventures, and how the subsequent subversion of stronger regulatory pushback has reinvigorated this area. Professor Vasudevan's research focuses primarily on themes related to the political economy of money and finance, and Marxian and post-Keynesian macro-analysis. She's the author of Things Fall Apart, From the Crash of 2008 to the Great Slump. Her new book, The Enchanter's Wand, The Volatile Partnership at the Heart of Global Finance, by Verso Books, will be out later this year. So I, again, welcome you and welcome Professor Vasudevan. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this gathering. So I'm here to talk about digital delusions and cryptocurrency. And Bitcoin has gone through this roller coaster ride of ups and downs, and we are currently kind of going through another pullback in the market in Bitcoin, where the Bitcoin price has crashed from a high of about 124,000 in October to by about half, to a little over 70,000. And this has been a result of a pullback in market exuberance in general. This whole fears about AI bubble, the tariff chaos, all that's happening, and there's been a kind of investors have gone scared, and right now, quoting a crypto kind of venture capitalist, Bitcoin is being associated with the administration, is being associated, and is basically uh, kind of paying the price of being associated with this current administration. So, what is this? I mean, we are kind of seem to be on the verge of a precipice. There had been this uh, a lot of hype around cryptocurrency for a long time, and people thought it could just you could never miss. I mean, you could just keep going higher and higher, and now it seems maybe that's not true. And the problem is, of course, that there's all this mystique and mystery around crypto. We don't understand it, and it's kind of seems something which only these tech wizards really get, and ordinary mortals like us feel that okay, maybe they know something which we don't. So let's start with where this began. Now, after the collapse of Lehman in 2008 and the kind of the financial crisis, which kind of unfolded after that, there was a general outrage against the speculative excesses of the big banks, which had brought about that crisis and all the hardships associated with that. Um, and then there's also uh, this additional outrage because one actually saw the Federal Reserve's power being used to turn on this spigot of cash to basically bail out these same bankers who had brought about the crisis. So Main Street was left kind of uh, out of the lurch, while the big banks basically grew bigger and fatter and more consolidated. So this is the backdrop. And um, there was this famous white paper uh, brought out by Satoshi Nakamoto. That's a pseudonym. No one knows who actually kind of created it, which introduced this thing about Bitcoin. Now, it was offering a decentralized payment system which bypassed big banks and central banks. It was a direct peer-to-peer kind of mechanism. And this was basically a libertarian promise which depoliticized money by privatizing it and removing it from the control of both the states and the big banks. So the idea was, I mean, this was of this libertarian pipe dream was to replace the tyranny of central banks and the predations of big finance with a neutral, faceless arbitration through digital technology. So what makes it tick? What backs it? Now we don't really have to understand all the arcane stuff about blockchains and distributed ledgers and tokens to really to get a handle on what this is all about. The simple idea is code and algorithms would basically back crypto. And this was basically encapsulated in the magic of blockchain. Blockchain is basically time stamped, cryptographically proven transactions. So basically, it's like a computer code puzzle. And this, once this has been, the puzzle has been cracked, the transaction is recorded in distributed ledgers, which are basically ledgers which are shared in across and replicated in real time across a network of servers. So what this does is it replaces trust and institutionally grounded credibility. Because what gives banks their kind of the acceptability and credibility, the fact that they have large access to large amount of capital and they have the backing of the Fed. So this is being replaced by technology, code, and algorithms. Before I kind of talk a little about this, give a brief history of crypto, I just want to kind of give a little survey of the kind of elements of the cryptoverse. Now, Bitcoin, of course, was the original crypto asset, but beyond that, there's a range of altcoins, things like Doge and others. Now, these are, again, like Bitcoin, basically algorithm and code-based assets. And they have been touted, like Bitcoin, as an alternative currency. Now, for something to function as currency, it has to have a stable price. But all these Bitcoins and altcoins have a very volatile price. Their price goes ups and down. They have a very slow settlement process. And they also have a huge environmental footprint. The process of creating these coins guzzles a lot of energy. So this is not really a means of payment or money. It is a financial asset. It's a new frontier for finance to make profits. And the only place where it can be used as a means of payment is in the shady world of money laundering, illegal trades, the dark net, and corporate ransomware. Now, the stable part of the cryptoverse is what's called stable coins. Unlike altcoins whose prices are volatile, stable coins price is kept on par. It is backed by either cash and conventional safe assets or by crypto assets. So stable coins are kind of a bridge between the more volatile altcoins and conventional currencies like the dollar or the euro. The crypto financial landscape is made up of what's called DeFi or decentralized finance. And this is, again, supposed to be the crypto dream. It's decentralized. You basically have automated protocols. You could think of a code, a troll-like code, which is, basically wandering the internet's ethosphere and basically executing contracts, looking for deals. But a good chunk of cryptoverse is not decentralized. It is actually conducted through centralized exchanges and centralized platforms. So for all the hype of decentralization, the cryptoverse also needs and depends on centralization. So you have these platforms and exchanges who trade, lend, and invest in crypto assets. And this includes things like Celsius, Block, Coinbase, Binance, or even the infamous FTX. More about that later. So we have a full-fledged, complex financial ecosystem which replicates the functions and services of conventional finance. You're buying, selling, you're lending, you're investing. And in the pandemic, in particular, when everyone was kind of, locked in their homes and tied to their screens, there was a big boost to crypto. So by the end of 2021, in the first year of the pandemic, the total capital in the crypto sphere had crossed $3 trillion. Stable coins were about 120 billion. The decentralized finance sector was 230 billion. So there's a huge jump. At the same time, crypto fraud also peaked during the pandemic. And you can see that in this chart here, that basically between April 2020 and July 2020, you suddenly had all these people on screens running scams on crypto because people didn't want to miss out and they were basically vulnerable to scamsters. The capitalization of cryptocurrency, it really boomed. You can see it is flat till around 2018. And basically, it takes off after 2020. But even after it takes off, you can see these ups and downs. And it's very, very volatile. In 22, after this long boom with post-pandemic boom, you had the first shock, what's sometimes called the crypto winter, even though it was happening in the summer. You had the collapse of these paired currencies called Terra and Luna. Now, Terra was a normal altcoin with very volatile prices. It was paired to a stable coin called Luna, basically again through code. And the idea was that demand, um, basically Luna holders were making a profit from their stakes in Terra. And Terra demand was being pumped up by a Terra lending platform. It was Anchor. It was lending in Terra. It was not lending in dollars or euros. It was lending in terms of Terra and offering a 20% rate of return. Now, sounds too good to be true. It's because it was. And so when this started kind of unraveling, uh, Terra and Luna, this paired currencies, also basically fell. This was followed soon after by the collapse of two big crypto funds, Celsius and Three Arrows. But what is even more striking is that Tether, the largest stablecoin. Remember, stablecoins are coins whose value is fixed at par. Tether started to collapse. Bitcoin collapsed from 69,021 to by more than a third to 20,000 by July. Ether, another important crypto asset, also declined from $5,000 in 21 to $1,300 by 22. And the total value of all cryptocurrencies, which had crossed 3 trillion, if you remember the previous chart, to less than 90 billion. So it became less than one third. Decentralized finance also fell by more than 60%. And so you had this big unraveling. You would have thought that, unraveling would lead to rethinking, but unfortunately it didn't. But before we talk about rethinking, let's see what went wrong. So basically look at the fragile foundations of crypto finance. So crypto transactions are pseudo-anonymous, which means you don't know who is actually making the transaction. And it is done through these networks. Now, this means when you normally when a bank lends, you are able to run credit scores and and basically do a check on the creditor, on the borrower. Now, that kind of credit risk assessment is not possible. So instead of that, what you give collateral plays a big role, where you give a certain amount of, offer a certain asset as collateral and borrow. Now, so collateral plays a big role in crypto lending. And the wrinkle here is that lending in crypto tokens is not to build houses or, set up a business. It's basically to buy more crypto assets. So the purpose is to buy more crypto assets. And in order to do that, you're using your own crypto asset base as collateral. So your crypto assets are being used to buy even more and more crypto assets. To make things worse, you have what's called rehypothecation. Not only are you using your own capital base, you are borrowing crypto assets and using that as collateral so that the same crypto asset can be used to generate multiple loans. So you have this pyramid which is being erected on the shifting sands of very volatile crypto collateral. So this is the first shaky kind of foundation. The second is something which characterizes, again, standard banking. Now, a bank basically takes deposits and makes loans, conventional bank. Now, if all the depositors start pulling out, so the deposits are short term, while its loans are long term, maybe to build a house or whatever. Now, if all the depositors, because that money can be pulled out anytime, if all the depositors pull out, the bank is going to find itself unable to basically pay out these deposits. So this is called, this is a mismatch between assets, which are long-term, and liabilities like deposits, which are short-term. And a classic run is when liabilities all get called at once. You see a similar process happening in crypto entities. So Tether, the stable coin which started teetering, was supposed to maintain par through a backing with safe assets. Now, when Tether collapsed, it was like a money market fund, like reserve fund collapsing in 2008. And the reason it collapsed is because the assets which were backing it were not so liquid. It didn't use treasuries, it used commercial paper, which is basically short-term loans to businesses. And this was which are used for short-term transactions. What is more, there was no regulatory oversight. No one knew what the backing was. They didn't have to display their accounts or run a check. They didn't have a cushion of reserves, which would basically allow them to pay out when depositors said, we want our money back. And they didn't have a safety net. Banks have the deposit insurance. And so if your savings in a bank are protected because the Fed insures it. No such insurance exists or safety net exists for crypto funds. And finally, what basically exacerbates this fragility is the fact that crypto borrowings are being channeled into rent-seeking speculation. They're not being used to finance real economic activity. We don't borrow crypto funds to start a business. We use it to basically buy more crypto assets. So this was the fragile foundations, and basically by 2022, you'd have thought that, okay, people should be rethinking, policymakers should be getting their act together and trying to basically regulate or at least clamp down on the sector. And another big reason for clamping down is that apart from generating instability, it is also the crypto also basically has expanded the hunting grounds for speculation. It's added one more place where you could bet. Now, these bets also enable some people to get very rich very fast. So it is a powerful mechanism for concentration and centralization. And the distribution of financial assets is heavily skewed to the top, to those who have more. So there's a study of Bitcoin between 2015 and 21. It found that 0.1% of the miners who are creating Bitcoins controlled half of the entire mining capacity. 0.1% controlled half. And 0.01% owned more than a quarter of all the assets. So there's the same kind of inequality that you see in finance in general, you see in an exaggerated manner in Bitcoin too. So far from democratizing or decentralizing, Bitcoin is another avenue for concentration. And large investors could wield their power to set terms, manipulate prices, gather larger returns, and while smaller investors lost out. So you had finance for its own sake and the prospect of quick riches. And FTX Alameda, the infamous Sam Bankman-Fried company, at its peak was worth 32 billion, just through kind of creating assets out of thin air. Now, finance has been marked by instability. You had the 2008 crisis, and you've had many stock market bubbles. They boom, they crash, and recurrent financial crises have historically also led to this recognition that individual financial companies have a collective stake in market collapse. You may be each company for itself, each bank for itself, but when it came to moments of crisis, there was a need for coordination. And you needed centralized rescue actions to basically prevent contagion from spreading, from the dominoes from falling. And so at the peak of the crypto winter in 22, FTX Alameda bailed out these crypto companies, Voyager and BlockFi. Sam Bankman-Fried was being feted. You could see him everywhere. He was on the cover of magazines. He was the next big thing, until the spectacular unraveling of his company. It was basically revealed that he was siphoning funds from depositors and risking it all in cryptosphere using a backdoor entry kind of in the software. And this tells you that, okay, privately coordinated rescues are not enough. Now, in 1907, when you had the banking panic in the US, JP Morgan, the then big financier, was basically started these lifeboat operations, and he set in motion or helped set in motion the process of setting up the Federal Reserve. Sam Bankman-Fried was kind of compared to JP Morgan when he was rescuing Voyager and BlockFi, but it became clear that he was not JP Morgan. He was closer to Charles Ponzi or Bernie Madoff. He was running a big scam. So private rescues are not enough, and even JP Morgan and bankers in 1907 recognized that. That is why they wanted a central bank. And there's this historical pattern: privately created liquid assets, they gather momentum, there's a big bubble, and finance kind of keeps growing. You have the inevitable crash. And at this time, because of the kind of the tentacles of finance spread out so widely, some of these entities are too big to fail. If they crash, they threaten the entire social system. The central bank or the Central Monetary Authority steps in to rescue it in order to basically restore status quo. And once it steps in and a safety net is provided, it again leads to more widespread use of these financial instruments, these risky financial instruments, and the bets become larger. Now, this is sometimes being called the doom loop. You have the bets of big finance, and you have the rescue or by the central bank. Every rescue means the bets become larger, which means a larger rescue, a larger bailout is needed. And so you have this tension. The state asserts its monopoly over the creation of financial assets, tries to regulate them, but private finance continuously tries to stretch these mechanisms. So the state is dependent on financial markets to prop up public trust in its debt, and financial markets rely on the state for its safety net. So the cryptosphere is basic which emerged from the convulsions in 2022, reflected the tensions of this partnership. Okay. What you see in this process, especially after the pandemic and the big boost the pandemic gave to crypto, is the emergence of the crypto lobby as new power brokers. They began kind of flexing their muscle. They had a lot of money power. They began using it. In 2022, there was huge lobbying around the infrastructure bill about nearly 9 million was spent to defeat a part of the proposal, which was basically trying to crack down on tax avoidance by crypto companies. The 24 election can be seen in some senses as the coming of age of the crypto lobby. It is an election where the role of big banks or big tech has been kind of rivaled by the role of the crypto lobby. There were three big super PACs, Fair Shake, Defend American Jobs, uh, and Protect Progress. Forget their names. These are all crypto lobbyists. And they spent over 133 million to bolster the campaigns of crypto-friendly congressional candidates and defeat kind of skeptics like Sherrod Brown in the 24 election. So another part of this kind of what's called the mainstreaming of crypto, how it enters the kind of the inner lob, I mean the high table of finance and politics, is its kind of symbiosis with big tech and big finance. There was so much money to be made that big tech companies and banks, big banks, didn't want to lose out, and they started kind of adopting crypto tokens and other kind of, and blockchain as part of their mechanisms too. This was further given a boost as regulations began to be eased. Now, in the Biden administration, there was some clampdown by the SEC under Gary Gensler on some of the nefarious practices. But you also had, in Jan 24, a SEC ruling which allowed Bitcoin exchange traded funds run by banks and asset management funds like BlackRock to basically trade in Bitcoin futures. Now, this opened the floodgates. There was this big rally in Bitcoin. It crossed the $70,000 mark. And by December 24, it had broken the $100,000 mark. October 25, again, as a result of the more kind of easy policy under the present regime, basically it went above 126K in October. So political patronage and regulatory latitude in the current regime, and also let's not forget there were these big gala dinners hosted, which basically where crypto lobby was invited. All this gave a new lease of life to crypto. Lawsuits against them were dropped. There's been initiated, it's still taking shape, a Bitcoin reserve fund. This would be like a deposit insurance fund for Bitcoin, and it would extend the public safety net. So, for example, right now, tax dollars could be used to prop up the price of Bitcoin as it's currently crashing. A very significant move, which has kind of taken off, is the Genius Act. Now, what this is trying to do is instate a regulatory framework for stable coins, the digital tokens pegged to safe assets, and in particular, stable coins which are linked to the US Treasury. Now, the Genius Act is meant to provide kind of light touch regulation. It also opens the door for non-financial companies like X and Meta to issue their stablecoins. Now, Meta had already tried with Diem, but now basically, to quote Elizabeth Warren, the biggest billionaires are being given the license to start a currency which would compete with the dollar. Now, the design, of course, is not to compete with the dollar, but to basically buttress the global status of the dollar in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of flux. People are talking about the fissuring of the global order. In these kind of unstable, chaotic times, stable coins backed by US treasuries are being promoted as a tool of monetary and geopolitical policy. Now, bulk of stable coins, like more than like 98% of the stable coins are dollar denominated. So it is a very, I mean, it is a dollar market. And the idea is that stable coins will promote the demand for US treasuries at a time when the US debt is kind of skyrocketing. There is the credit rating on US debt has fallen, has been brought down. In this time, it is believed that boosting unregulated private instruments driven by speculative movements will be the linchpin of the future dollar's safe haven status globally. And one really kind of a sense of what is taking shape is seen in this. The Trump family's company, World Liberty Financial, a cryptocurrency venture, had launched a stablecoin just before the Genius Act was launched. Now, this stablecoin is being used by an Abu Dhabi investment firm for a 2 billion investment in crypto exchange Binance. Okay, so there's this melding of crypto with geopolitics in a very unstable world, which kind of makes things extremely uncertain and a bit scary. So, where do we go from here? So, it's quite clear that the emergence of crypto finance, whether or not we understand the software or the coding or whatever, we don't need to. It's quite clear that it has not transcended or suppressed the inner logic of finance. And what is the inner logic? A tendency to create inequality and polarization, and a tendency to engender fragility and crisis. Now, finance is a complicated and contradictory beast, but it is also essential plumbing for the capitalist economic system. And this is the contradiction. It's essential, but it is the basis for speculation. So it gives rise to this giant casino. Now, what crypto finance has done is that not only has it not suppressed the inner logic, it doesn't even perform the functions of finance in the real economy. It is completely about speculation. It's not about facilitating trade. It's not about enabling investment. It's not even about allowing households to, kind of meet ends. And so as crypto finance grows and permeates conventional finance, the next crypto convulsion, which might be happening even now, will not only be more widespread, it will have much more profound repercussions. So on that grim note, let me end. Thank you so much. I look forward to I wanted to keep it slightly short so you could have more time for discussion. So I hope I was clear and didn't speak too fast.
Okay, we have time for some questions, though. Does anyone here in the hall have any questions off the bat? Yes, sir. I'm going to bring you a microphone.
It seems to me, if I've understood, that this is a giant pyramid scheme that's going on, and if it has the tendency to eventually undercut the U.S. dollar as the main exchange currency, what are other countries doing to counter this? Like, what is China doing? Because they're starting to denominate some of their trades in their own currency and get away from the U.S. dollar.
Okay, can I answer now? Do I respond now? Bob?
Pardon me?
Do I respond now? Can I respond now?
Yes, please.
Okay. So that's a very interesting question because so there's one thing is quite clear that the technology, I mean, if you think of the simple, not crypto in general, but things like blockchain, the idea of smart contracts or tokens, that has kind of, especially blockchain, has become part of the infrastructure of finance. Now, the option before you is, do you somehow harness it to public purpose, or do you leave it loose to private profiteering? Now, the growth, I mean, so in response to this big growth of crypto assets and even the growth of private stable coins, one of the things which has been emerged is what's called central bank digital currencies. This is a way of harnessing the technology, and it's particularly convenient for cross-border transactions. And what China is doing, and China, I mean, it facilitates payments, it allows easy, so there is something about it which is attractive. What China has done, if the US is following the route to, let the private profiteers make hay, China has been basically trying to harness it, keep the speculative tendencies of finance under check, and use basically a digital yuan as basically something which is a more efficient, pervasive means of both making payments and settling transactions. Now, it experimented first by using it domestically, the e-yuan, and now it is gradually trying to use it more in international sphere. And one of the things about this is that, especially in a world where the dollar has been weaponized, sanctions, and things like that, this technology offers a way to basically circumvent the surveillance by the West. So, in some senses, this technology can be used in different ways, and there's China has followed different paths. And basically, how effective and stable the infrastructure which is developed for digital kind of currency and finance, that is going to basically also be an important part where, where there'll be a testing of power between the renminbi and the dollar.
Okay, any questions from others here today or so far? Okay, I have one.
Sure.
I have several, but if the so-called stable currency of the US dollar is foundering right now in the world exchanges of currencies, it certainly is in Mexico. We've lost 16% in the last year as expats who might bring their dollars down here. How stable is that, and how able is that to be a buttress of anything?
Okay, so it's not, so one has to be careful when thinking about this, because yes, there's been a dollar slide, and a fairly steep dollar slide in the past year, but the dollar is still about 90, it's on one side of 90% of transactions in the foreign exchange market. It's about half of lending globally is in dollars. So the dollar is still very entrenched. Its share as a reserve currency has fallen, but it's still far above any other currency. So there's a certain amount of inertia, but there has been a shift, and I think the shift is interesting. Is that now, the dollar was the safe asset, but now global investors and people elsewhere cannot trust in the stability of its value. So when the dollar still dominates, but now they have to find ways in which they hedge, they protect against the ups and downs and the currency fluctuation. And that, perversely enough, gives a further boost to financial transactions. So you may have a dollar transaction, then you'll have another transaction as a hedge to protect you when the dollar falls. So it's this, it's this. I mean, the dollar is kind of the. I mean, its fault lines are very clearly visible. There are growing tensions, but it's still. I mean, it's there's inertia which is keeping it in place still.
Uh, okay. Another quick question. What is the liability of U.S. taxpayers on a potential bailout of cryptocurrency if there's a tie between the
So,
dollars?
okay, that's a hard one because nothing is clear. I mean, it's not clear how the Bitcoin Reserve Fund is going to be kind of implemented or funded. But if history is any kind of gives you any lessons, it is that every crash is followed by a bailout, is followed by a big jump in public debt. And in order to and that public debt becomes a reason to do things like cut back on welfare spending, cut back on public investment and infrastructure, which basically erodes the lives and livelihoods of working people. So I can't put a number of it on it. It's unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else has arisen in the room? Do we have anybody online? Okay. And can I do another? Early on, those of us who care about the future of the planet were hearing of enormous carbon generation of energy to stoke the furnace of crypto to a magnitude that seemed calamitous. Is there anything that has changed that or reduced that or mollified that?
The short answer is not really. And it's become worse with the whole entry of AI and big and hyperscale and these like Meta and all these hyperscaling into cloud computing and crypto, because they are really kind of guzzling energy on a tremendous scale. Now there was this technology, it's called merge, which was uh, which was supposed to kind of use less energy. Now the downside of that, it's not really taken off, but the downside of that is it may reduce the carbon footprint somewhat, but it'll do so at the cost of increasing the inequalizing tendency of crypto generation. So
Okay,
those
thank
who
you.
have assets will be generate more, those who don't will not. So there's no sustainable both ecologically and in terms of social sustainability. There's no way of generating this.
Should I try one more?
Sure.
Okay, we have an audience here. It's safe to say, humbly, that tends toward investing with retirement sustainability in mind. It sounds like, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, given the conventional wisdom of older investors to go conservative, that Bitcoin may not be or not Bitcoin, crypto may not be the best option. And I'm not saying you should be giving investment advice. I'm just looking for your outlook generally as
Yeah, I'd be very nervous. And here's the crazy thing. Like right now in the current regime, there is this push to include Bitcoin and crypto investments in pension and retirement funds. So you may not have a choice if your money is coming from a retirement fund, unless you kind of actively monitor it. Normally, pension funds are supposed to be, and retirement funds are supposed to invest more in safe assets, but a green light has been given to investing in this sphere, which is worrying. I'd be worried.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, I think if we have no other questions, oh, good. Well, we have two, actually. This is always what happens, but that's good.
Okay, first of all, I'm still a little bit confused about Bitcoin is and how it actually works. But in general, what is not clear to me, how a government, a country, will be able to manage and actually control the financing where if it is going to be everything through cyber, and there is no way of, if I understand correctly, for the government to know where the money come from, who owns it.
So I wouldn't say there's no way. Like, I mean, I think
Does
like
that
the
make
Chinese
sense?
government is
And the question is,
monitors
how
much more effectively.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Did you complete your question?
I'm asking, so I'm
Yeah.
asking, is the
So
government, is of the interest of any government, even more progressive government, to implement such system?
no. So there's a difference. What is
Is
being
there any
implemented?
benefit for it?
No. So there's negligible benefit from private cryptocurrency and crypto assets. It's just a speculative asset. It doesn't help finance investment, social spending, or anything. What may be used is some part of the technology as a way of, making payment system more, effective, or being able to reach, a wider set of people faster. There's something in the technology, but technologies don't exist in a social vacuum. It is a social setting of that technology, how it's being used, which is important. So the private profiteering, I don't see any benefit. But I wouldn't dismiss the technology if it's used, in a more democratic, accountable way, which is subject to public scrutiny and accountability. You have to know where that money is being used and what is backing that money. So the accounts have to be transparent. The kind of transactions that are being taking place have to be, completely above board. So that requires a lot of regulation, which is not what is happening in the US, but is, for instance, happening to a greater degree in China. So I wouldn't
have another question?
I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I'm not quite sure what exactly the baby is, to be completely honest.
We had one more also? Okay. One quick one from me. I don't want to monopolize. Oh, you had something, sir? I didn't want to monopolize, but when you said semi or quasi anonymous, could you elaborate on what that means? And also, I guess it relates to this government oversight thing. If there is or is not anonymity in terms of taxes, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. So the pseudo-anonymity is the setup. There's nothing one can regulate to make it less pseudo-anonymous so that, and that is part of the push which is happening, that if there is transactions and if exchange funds or platforms are making money out of that, that has to be recorded and it has to be taxed. And that is one of the things which the lobbyists tried to prevent and succeeded in preventing in the IRA. It was kind of tucked within that. So pseudo-anonymous means that, yeah, when they enter, you don't undergo individual credit check, you don't have to say who you are. But that doesn't mean that it can't be found out. And people have kind of, for example, the study I said about Bitcoin, it actually traced a lot of the people who were the big investors. And that is why it is pseudo-anonymous.
Okay, gracias. Thank you. So if there are no further questions, I think what we can do is wrap up for today and thank everyone who's watching and attending here and will be watching in the future online. Again, globaljusticecenter.org is the place to see the archive when things post. And if you're curious about what we've done in the past, I think most of that information doesn't go stale really quickly. So thanks again, and I want to thank you for your presentation. It was enlightening, to say the least, for most of us who are kind of in the dark. And so thank you for getting together with us.
Thank you so much for calling me. This has been a lot of fun, and I hope I could clarify a bit.
Thank you. And we'll look for your publication, The
Thank
Enchanters
you.
Bond, the Volatile Partnership of Global Finance, coming out later this year.
Thank you.
All right, great. Well, thanks for all of you for attending, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.